25th, the New York Knicks lost Game 3 of the playoffs in the first round to the Atlanta Hawks 109 to 108. After this loss, there were a lot of questions on if the Knicks would make it out of the playoff series alive, if Jalen Brunson was capable of being the best player on a championship contending team, if Mike Brown was going to keep his job past this year. Everything said championship or bust. Since then, not only have the Knicks ripped off 7 straight wins, the 3 to get rid of Atlanta and then sweeping the Philadelphia 76ers, they have won 4 of those games by 30 points. They have scored over 135 points on 3 separate occasions. They have held the opposing team under 100 points on 4 separate occasions. Karl-Anthony Towns only averaged 16 points in that last series against Philadelphia. Granted, he was in foul trouble basically every night, and in the first and second game did not play in the fourth quarter. Jalen Brunson is having his worst playoff series, worst playoff trip really in the history of his playoff career, and he's averaging 28 points, 6 assists, shooting 42% from the field, and just under 40% from 3. OG Anunoby is playing like one of, if not the very best two-way player in the NBA right now. He hadn't even played the last 2 games against the Philadelphia 76ers. He has been immense, taking away the best opposing option on the offensive side of the ball and then scoring himself at an extremely high level, making very difficult shots, getting after getting into the paint and jamming the ball home. Karl-Anthony Towns has continued to be an elite rebounder, and he's looking like one of the best passing bigs this game's ever seen with the way he's playing. That Game 4 against Philadelphia, he had 10 assists in the first 2 quarters. I've never seen Karl-Anthony Towns play like this, and their offense is running just through him almost every time down the floor. Josh Hart is continuing to do what I like to call Josh Hart things. Hustle play after hustle play. Playing good defense. Just adding to the team where it matters. Mikal Bridges is finding his feet again. He did not have a good series at Atlanta, but he was fantastic against Philadelphia in Game 4. He had 12 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, did not play in the fourth quarter. In Game 3, he had 23 points. In Game 2, he had 18 points. Mikal Bridges is looking much more like himself. And not to mention that in Game 4, they set a record they tied the record for the most threes made in a playoff game. They broke the record for the most playoff threes hit in a half. Deuce McBride started the game 6 for 6. He finished the game 7 for 8. 7 for 9, excuse me. This Knicks team looks absolutely incredible. That's the point I'm getting at. And I think whether it's Cleveland, who currently lead the Pistons 3-2 in their series, or it's Detroit pull it back and win these next 2, I don't think either of them stand a chance against this New York team. The Pistons have beaten them all season. They beat the brakes off of them. I think they beat them by 30 twice, and then the other one was a 10 to 20 point win. But what I'll raise to you is the Boston Celtics did that exact same thing to New York last year, and then they got to the playoffs, and the Knicks found a way to win games there. I do not think that the Pistons have any way to compete with the Knicks in a playoff series. The reason they did so well against them in the regular season was because their physicality and their intensity on defense was completely outmatched the Knicks every night. That's not going to happen in the playoffs. The Knicks have played incredibly intense defense. You've seen it out of Bridges. You've seen it out of OG Anunoby, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart. Have all stepped up on the defensive end. Another point that I'll raise is that I don't think Jalen Duren causes issues for Karl-Anthony Towns. I think Towns will be able to stay out of foul trouble, and I do not see how Duren matches up with him on the offensive side of the ball. He's kind of similar to Onyenka Okongwu in the fact that he's a lot smaller than Towns is, and Towns is going to use that to his advantage. He's either going to get straight after him, get to the post, or he's going to stand on the perimeter, wait for backdoor cuts, and the Pistons are going to have to stay with those because Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and Jordan Clarkson make incredibly great cuts that Towns has been finding with his ridiculous ability to pass the ball that we've seen over the last 2-3 weeks. And They are better suited to match up with Jalen Brunson. Asor Thompson has given Brunson problems. Not too many, because got to remember that this is a team that the Knicks sent home last year. And again, this year it's been different. The Pistons have had that number, but you don't slow down Jalen Brunson. Even the Hawks slowed down Brunson. He still gave them 28 across the series. He's back in it. Is back in his rhythm. He gave the Philadelphia 76ers a lot of problems. A lot of problems. Especially you look back at game one, Jalen had 25 at half. He is rolling, and his shots are falling, and that's scary. And he's not the only one. Landry Shamet, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart is starting to get back on track with his three-point shooting. Again, Mikal Bridges. Guys are getting hot for this Knicks team. You have to hope that the amount of rest they're about to get between this game. I'd rather see Cleveland win the series in Game 6 from a Knicks perspective, because you don't want too much time off. But this time off means that OG Anunoby will be back for Game 1 of that series. And if it ends up being Cleveland, I don't see how they stand a chance. I'm going to be honest. I don't know if Cleveland will take more than a game off of New York, because I don't see how they guard both Jalen Brunson and OG Anunoby. If you put Dean Wade on Jalen Brunson or Max Strus, whoever they end up starting, that's great. You cannot put Donovan Mitchell or James Harden on OG Anunoby. He will fry them. And OG has been so good on offense in the last 4 or 5 months. He's been great. The back end of the season, his offensive game has completely exploded. He was borderline an all-star this season. He's been so good. Again, you look at that first game against Philly, it was the second game against Philly. OG had 24. You look at the games against Atlanta, even in the loss in Game 3, OG Anunoby had 29. The win in Game 4, OG had 22. The win in Game 5 or Game 6, OG had 17 and 10. The closeout game where they won by 40 points, OG Anunoby had 29. James Harden and Donovan Mitchell, both of them are too small, and James Harden's not a good defender. We know that. Donovan Mitchell's not a bad defender, but I don't see how you're going to match him up with OG Anunoby. He's too small. And so that leaves you to put, honestly, to shut him down. Yes, you'd rather shut down Jalen Brunson, so you're probably going Max Strus or Dean Wade on Jalen Brunson. But if you want to stop OG Anunoby, the only way you match that up is by putting, unless they put Evan Mobley on him, but then you're taking Evan Mobley out of the paint, and Jared Allen can't guard him on the perimeter. This, defensively, I think Cleveland are going to be in a lot of trouble with how they match up with New York. With the way that OG Anunoby and Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson are all playing offense. And even then, Mikal Bridges, who's finding his footing, if he's guarded by James Harden, who I assume they'd actually put on Josh Hart. So say he's guarded by Donovan Mitchell, that's a matchup I like for Mikal Bridges. I do not see how Cleveland can match up on defense with this New York team, especially playing the way they're playing. And then you get to the New York's bench, because there was a lot of criticism last year about the Knicks not willing to use the bench. And when Mike Brown was using it, all I heard was that the bench wasn't playing well enough. Well, now, Landry Shamet's come back in, and he's been on fire from behind the arc. Deuce McBride, again, he started in the last game 7 for 9 from 3. Jordan Clarkson has been awesome. Even Jose Alvarado has started to find an offensive productivity. And that's without mentioning Mitchell Robinson, who has been one of the most impactful players off the bench all season. Mitchell Robinson does not play a high volume of minutes, so he didn't end up in the Sixth Man of the Year conversation. But if we are sitting and talking about the most impactful player off the bench when they play the minutes, it is Mitchell Robinson. Nobody impacts the game more than he does in the short amount of time that he's on the court. If you put his numbers on the glass across the 35 minutes a night that you'd expect to see out of a starter, Mitchell Robinson would average like 18 boards or something ridiculous. He averages 8 boards, like 8.5 boards in 20 minutes. It's incredible how impactful he is. Teams have to game plan for Mitchell Robinson because he's that impactful on the glass. Now, admittedly, the only thing that holds him back is his inability to make free throws, but even that is getting better. It's not great, but he's shooting it well enough to where teams cannot just play hack-a-Mitch. And they're still going to do it because you have to keep testing him, but if he can consistently start to hit some of these free throws, that's a problem. The only way that teams are able to slow down this Knicks offense right now is by fouling Mitchell Robinson. So I really don't see anyone out east, any of the other two out east, really giving the New York Knicks a problem. I think Detroit would have a better shot just because, again, I don't think Cleveland stand a chance defensively with the way Brunson, Towns, and OG Anunoby are playing. However, you look out west, and the Thunder are in the conference finals, and then the winner of the Spurs and the Timberwolves, that series is 3-2 to San Antonio. I have to assume San Antonio is going to get it done. And if it comes down to it, I like San Antonio to take down the Thunder. I do. They won the season series, and Wimby just plays so well against Chet Holmgren. But either way, if it ends up being the Thunder, that is the only team that I really think is going to have a chance to stop the New York Knicks this season. They are very well coped to slow down the Knicks on offense. Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, A.J. Mitchell's a good defender. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander himself is a good defender. And then the two bigs between Hartenstein and Chet, they'd probably find a way to slow down Cat a little bit. And OG Anunoby would be a huge factor in that series, just to see how, you're probably putting Lou Dort on Jalen Brunson because of the threat he poses. So what OG would do against a smaller defender, against like a guy like Cason Wallace, or maybe it's A.J. Mitchell, that would be the matchup to watch for the Knicks' success. But I think that certainly the Thunder are the only team that I really see beating the Knicks in a series. And I say that I know the Spurs are great, and I think the Spurs could beat the Knicks in a season series, but in a playoff series. But in the season series, they didn't split. The Knicks won 2 games to 1 in the 3 games they played, and they obviously won the big one in the NBA Cup final. And then the Knicks got the better of them in a game that Josh Hart did not play in, and the Knicks were in a struggling period. But then the Spurs won an 11-game win streak in that third game, the third time they played them this season, and the Knicks rolled them by 25 points, something like that. It was a close to a 20-point win, and Wimby seems to be frustrated when shorter and physical guards or forwards are guarding him. You see the Thunder do it with Alex Caruso. The Knicks like to do it with OG Anunoby, but Mitchell Robinson also poses a problem for Wimby. He did in both the Knicks wins. His physical presence, he's quite shifty. Mitchell Robinson. He's not, for a guy his size, he's quite agile, and he just bothers Wimby that little bit. Wimby did not play very well. He was restricted in the Cup final with how many minutes he could play there. And then in the Game 3 of the season series, he did not play very well because the Knicks can agitate him. Stephon Castro's a good defender, but he doesn't slow down Jalen Brunson enough. De'Aaron Fox is another good defender. He's too small to guard OG Anunoby, so I assume it would be Devin Vassell to guard OG Anunoby in that series. That's a matchup I like. And then Towns, it would be a tough series for Towns because the length of Wimby is a problem. But really, I think Towns can get into his chest, and that's where his passing is going to matter. That's where those backdoor cuts from OG Anunoby and from Mikal Bridges and Jordan Clarkson are going to come in huge, because Towns is going to have to be physical without fouling on offense, which is a very tall task for Karl Anthony Towns. But then he's going to have to continue to be very unselfish. He's going to have to find the open runner, the open shooter, because he's not going to get the better of Wimby getting in the paint. And really, Wimby doesn't have to. Wimby can stay back off you and still contest your three. So he doesn't have to give up he doesn't have to step up and close the distance on Towns' willingness to shoot threes, which is a problem because Towns loves to, after he's gotten after you a couple times getting downhill, he loves to just stop early and shoot. But Wimby can continue to give the space because of his wingspan to close down. So Wimby's not a fun matchup for Towns, and Towns did struggle in the games we played against the San Antonio Spurs, or the Knicks played against the San Antonio Spurs rather. But I do like how well he's been playing. He's been playing arguably some of the best basketball of his career. And just he is the way they run the offense through him now. It gets Jalen open off the ball. It means Jalen is not having to hold the ball for 20 seconds of a possession. And Towns, again, is passing right now. It looks, I mean, outside of Jokic, it's probably the best passing a big man has displayed in quite some time. It is really, really impressive. I would highly recommend that you go and just watch his assists against Philly because some of his passing was ridiculous. He had one that didn't even go down as an assist where he was driving and didn't ever check his shoulder and just kind of turned and threw it back behind him and found an open shooter. I think it might have been Bridges, which the shot did not fall. Maybe it was that first deuce miss, but his passing was incredible. He had a touch pass to Josh Hart where he came. It was thrown into him, and he just glances over and just swings his hand, taps the ball straight to Josh Hart, who takes an easy layup on a backdoor cut. The Knicks' movement on offense, Mike Brown has designed it so well, and again, a lot of it comes down to the passing of Karl Anthony Towns. Jalen Brunson's been super unselfish as well. I really think that this team is certain. I think they'll be in the NBA Finals. It's just a matter of do they have enough to compete with the Spurs and the Thunder. I'd like to say it would be maybe it probably goes 7 games with the Spurs, and I think the Knicks could get it done. The Thunder's the one that poses the biggest question for me, just because you're never going to be able to slow down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I'm not even going to begin to talk about the officiating that we've seen in the playoffs for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm going to let that be as it be. But I just think, if Jalen Williams plays, I think that's another big factor. That would be a problem because that's probably how they would set up to guard OG Anunoby, because Jalen can play some very solid. He's a very solid defender. So that would be a problem if he's healthy, but we just don't know because he's missed so much time already this season, and he seems to struggle to stay healthy. So I would say that if the San Antonio Spurs can get a win in the conference finals over the Oklahoma City Thunder, I would expect this New York team to be the NBA champions. But if the Thunder best the Spurs, I don't see a way that New York get away with a win in that series. As well as they're playing, I think they're playing the best basketball in the NBA right now. I thought Philly was going to be a tough series. I was more fearful of playing for the Knicks. I was more fearful that they would have to play Boston play Philly than they did Boston. I thought Boston was a nicer matchup, and it did not matter because they absolutely rolled Philadelphia, which was something that really surprised me. I thought they were going to struggle to hide Jalen Brunson on defense. Did not matter. I don't think they ever truly exposed Jalen Brunson on defense because the Knicks are swarming so well. They're blitzing at the right times. They did a lot of blitzing against Tyrese Maxey, and Maxey had a really poor series. A really, really bad series by his standards. Joel Embiid caused them problems, but that was really it. Foul trouble was an issue. Specifically, Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson. Huck Porty in Game 2 when Mitchell Robinson didn't play picked up 4 fouls in 6 minutes. So that was a problem. But outside of that, Paul George was one of the biggest threats for Philly on offense. VJ Edgecombe did not have a good series. And the Knicks, the way they were passing off defenders, they were keeping Jalen away from pick and rolls, which was huge. And so I see things that maybe they can irritate the Thunder. I don't think they'll have a problem irritating the Spurs on defense. I think the biggest question about if they get to face San Antonio, I think the biggest question is how do you stop Wembanyama? But like I said, he seems to be bothered when OG Anunoby has guarded him. He seems to be bothered when Mitchell Robinson has guarded him. But Wemby's going to show up when it matters. De'Aaron Fox has been iffy in this series. Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper are both playing great basketball, but I like the matchups of Mikal Bridges on Steph, and I like the matchup. I think you're just going to have to live with Dylan Harper. He's coming off the bench at the moment, so if he ends up starting, which I think there's a chance he could, you're just going to have to live with what he gives you against Jalen Brunson, because you're going to have to put Josh Hart on De'Aaron Fox, just like you did Josh Hart and CJ McCollum. You have to pick your battles when it comes to Jalen Brunson, who he's going to guard. And if you can continue to get him away from the ball, that's great. If they don't start Dylan Harper, I don't know what to do because he's simply too small to guard Devin Vassell. So we'll see. I think defensively they're in trouble whether they guard or whether they play the Spurs or the Thunder, and I don't think they're gonna have problems on defense against either the Pistons or the Cavs. So I really do expect this team to be in the conference or the NBA Finals. It's just a matter of what matchup they draw and how they can get it done. Um, but I think there is a situation where the New York Knicks are champions of the NBA and the NBA Cup, which would be the first time that had been done yet, which would be pretty cool. But if you make me put money on it right now, I'd say that it's very likely that the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to be the first retaining champions in like 8 years. That's the current thought process. But man, the Knicks, I just wanted to get on here just because they deserve so much credit for how entertaining their basketball has been, um, and how well they're playing at an extremely high level. That both closeout games that they've played in these series, they've won by 40 points, almost 40 points. That should not happen. Certainly shouldn't happen twice in one series. It has been a blast watching this Knicks playoff team um, get after it since that loss in Game 3. And I don't know what the mentality switch was. I don't know what Mike Brown has said to this team. I don't know if it was Jalen Brunson or Karl Anthony Towns who said something in that locker room, but something has switched, and they have been on an absolute tear. And it has been so entertaining to watch.